So, Terri Bainbridge, hello and welcome to Perfect Health on Elastic FM with Elaine Godley. Lovely to speak with you again.
Hi, good to be here.
So, Terri, I first knew you when you were living down in Exeter, but you've now floated down to Devon, and I think you're by the sea, are you?
Yeah, in Brixham. So
Fabulous.
not too far from Exeter, but yeah, nice to be by the sea. I've grown up in Penzance by the sea, back here again.
Brilliant, and it's obviously doing you good. You look fantastic.
Thank you.
So, I want to talk about the breast screening that you do. Your company called Thermologica, and breast screening often comes up in the news. I was listening to an article yesterday on the, that's my dog, it's absolutely typical, on Radio 4, and they were talking about the National Health Service 70 years and how breast screening has come along and sometimes been in favour, sometimes been out of favour. What are your thoughts on breast screening in the National Health Service?
It's a hot topic at the moment, I think, isn't it? With all the talk of, are we over screening? And I think we probably are a little bit, because if you look for something, you're going to find it. And the overdiagnosis is pretty bad with ductal carcinoma in situ, where they class it as a stage 0 cancer, so it's not even cancer. And women have been given chemotherapy and mastectomies because of it, and they wouldn't, if it hadn't been for screening, they would have never have known about it. But obviously people are concerned. The statistics aren't great, are they? 1 in 8, I think, women. But again, people don't realise that's a lifetime risk. So we've screened well over 600 women, and there's less than on one hand the amount of problems we've seen, really. So I think it's far less than women are led to believe. I think there's a lot of fear put into women about breast screening.
Absolutely, and it's damn painful as well, isn't it?
Yes, especially if you've got small boobs, like I used to have. They really jam you in there and squash you, which again is a crazy thing to do, because my tumour was actually quite large. So to think that it got rammed into a mammogram machine and probably broken up and squashed in there, it's not a good thought, really.
So you mentioned your own tumour. So when did your story begin with cancer?
I was diagnosed when I was 39, but I had worries long before that, because I had, like many women have, I had just lumpy breasts, and I was wondering, is this normal? Is it not? I'd go to the doctor and I'd say I've got lumps, and she'd feel them and say, no, they're normal lumps. So I asked for an ultrasound because I was too young for a mammogram, and they found a couple of cysts but said that that was fine. And then it was 6 years later that I found a sort of a slightly bigger lump, and I went back to the doctors again. I thought maybe I shouldn't even bother going. I felt like such a hypochondriac, and even the doctor said that doesn't feel like a problem, but come back in a few months' time if it's still there. So I went back again, and then I got a mammogram, and a biopsy confirmed it was cancer. And I was given the choice to have my breast removed or just the lump. And after breastfeeding a couple of kids, my boobs weren't up to much, so I said, I'll just get rid of the whole thing. And then it was only after the surgery, turned out pretty much my whole breast was a tumour. And it hadn't shown up on a mammogram, because really I should have been told, you have to have a mastectomy now. And that scared me, because we're all led to believe that mammograms are early detection and they find everything. And they don't at all. So that's when I started investigating what could I have done when I was in my 20s and early 30s, and I had a few concerns. Is there anything I could have done? I found out about thermography, which is widely used in America and other parts of the country, and that's how I got into it. I hassled the people who manufacture the cameras and said, look, let me set up a screening service for women like me, really. And that's how it all started.
And when was that?
That was 5 years ago now. And fortunately, my best friend Lisa, she joined me, because I don't think I could have done it on my own. I'd have been too nervous. And it's been great working together the past 5 years. We've it's now developed into a nice little company, and we see women in Exeter, Bath, and soon to be Harley Street in London.
Brilliant.
Fingers crossed.
You mentioned over 600 women that you've screened in the 5 years, which is excellent.
Yeah.
A handful of problems. So I wonder how many of those women would have shown up as having a problem if they'd had a mammogram.
Who knows? I mean, thermography is very different from mammogram screening. We don't actually see lumps. We see the activity around them. So we may well have seen women that have had lumps that have been inactive. And that's an interesting thing with the NHS screening programme, because I think, as you know, cancers can come and go, and many women may never have even have noticed they had cancer or a cancerous lump. And if they get screened by a mammogram, any old lump is seen, acted upon quite severely. Whereas with thermography, we can have a look and see if there's any sort of unusual activity going on, and monitor the situation and bring in other lifestyle interactions. And it's a far more proactive, I think, and gentler approach.
So when you say you don't see a lump, what do you actually see then on the thermography?
Well, in order for a lump to form, it needs to a tumour needs to create its own blood supply. It's something called angiogenesis, and we see that the heat created by a blood supply in an area where there shouldn't be one. So it's like a glorified thermometer, really. So we see how the body's functioning at that period in time.
So in terms of a picture, it's the heat that shows.
I can show you, actually. I've got a picture of my boobs here.
Oh, there we go.
Like that.
Oh.
So this is here is quite blue because that's my implants, where I've just had a complete mastectomy, but most people look like this on both breasts. And so these little areas of red, they can be quite normal. But what we're looking for is change over time. So if that little area of red on the scan the following year or the following few months had increased, we'd know that something unusual is going on, and that needs monitoring and investigation. I mean, a lot of people don't come to see us because they say, oh, I'm scared of what I might find. But if you're seeing a little bit of activity which precedes a tumour by about 5 to 10 years, it puts you in control. You can then check other things in your body, check your vitamin D levels, look at your diet, look at your stress levels, all these other things which we've seen people do. They'll go away and they'll change their lifestyle. They'll come back for their next thermogram and the redness is reduced. So I think it's a great thing for putting you in control of your health.
Absolutely, and it's remarkable how quickly things can be reversed, can't it?
We've seen in 3 months quite dramatic changes.
Yeah, well, I was, as you know, I was stage 4 reversed in 3 months.
Yeah.
Although my first cancer was DCIS that you referred to initially, I had one of these insurances for women's cancers, and when I claimed, they said it was the wrong sort of cancer. However, I had what they called high-grade DCIS, and my whole breast area was completely covered in it. And I didn't know what, this was back in 2009, so I didn't know what I now know. Had I known how you can reverse it with diet and lifestyle changes, I'm sure I would never have had my first surgery, but there we go, that's another story. So we've learned, haven't we, an awful lot as we go along, and it's nice that we can share our stories and our successes and what we've done with people. So
yeah,
when you find an area that you think might be an area of concern, what do you suggest people do immediately?
Well, unfortunately, the main suggestion that we have is you do actually need to go and get this checked out with your doctor. Now, they will then perform a mammogram or an ultrasound, but 9 times out of 10, they can't find anything because the activity that we're seeing precedes anything that you can see on a mammogram or an ultrasound by 5 to 10 years. So it depends on the person. Hopefully the person will say, great, I've been given the all clear, there's nothing that you can see on a mammogram or ultrasound, but then they will pay a bit more attention to their diet and lifestyle. But that's why the NHS poo-poos thermography a bit, I think, because they'll get sent people who have looks like they've got a problem with thermography, and they say, well, we can't find anything, so therefore thermography is wrong. There was a test study done about 30 years ago, though, where I think they scanned about 10,000 women, and a large proportion had abnormalities with thermography that weren't corroborated with mammogram or ultrasound. So they said, right, thermography is wrong. But those women were followed for another 5 or 10 years, and about 50% of them went on to have problems that were found by mammogram and ultrasound. So it's an early warning system.
That's a really good point, how things actually take a while to develop. And
yeah.
When we are faced with a diagnosis, we have all this hurry because the doctors have to check their, tick their boxes, and they have to do something with you within a certain period of time, don't they? So it's all this the fear, and then you end up getting swept along. But presumably the people that come to see you, the fact that they know about you, they're already of like mind and into complementary therapies in the first place.
Yeah, we find the majority of people who come to see us are pretty well self-educated in other ways of looking after themselves. They're not the sort of typical person that doesn't think about their health and says, oh, the NHS will look after me if anything goes wrong. They're quite responsible, which I think is the way that really all of us need to go if we're going to save the NHS. We need to take a bit more self-responsibility.
Absolutely, a topic dear to my heart. So you, as you know, I always ask guests on the programme to suggest a couple of songs. So what's the first song that you've chosen?
Oh God, I'm trying to remember now. Cockney Rebel, Come Up and See Me, Make Me Smile. As I was saying, I'm not really that into all sorts of music, so it's just something that's always made my feet tap.
Right, brilliant. Okay, so we'll just pause the interview while we listen to that song. Hold on just a second. So here we are, Rebel with Make Me Smile. So lovely song. It makes me smile, that song as well. One of the nice things about hosting this program is I can put the songs on that I like, and that's on my playlist too. So thanks for that, Terri. So you mentioned that you first had a problem when you were 39, and then things went on until you were 45. So what happened when you were 45 that kind of made you wake up? You said that you wanted to do a sort of bit of research and what?
Oh, I started researching pretty much straight. Well, things kind of snowballed after my diagnosis. 2 months after I started my chemo, my 4-year-old daughter got ill, and we just thought to start with she was kind of reacting a bit to my illness. But soon transpired, we had her checked out, and she had a brain tumour and was given less than a year to live. And the NHS couldn't do anything. And that's when I really started researching anything I could do to try and save her. Unfortunately, we couldn't. We ended up going to America. Our friends set up this amazing fund. But pretty much a year to her diagnosis, she passed away. And I think it was soon after that, just to try and keep myself sane, I think I wanted to research and try and do something, and that's when I kind of started Thermologica, so pretty much 6 months to a year after she passed away. And it's been ongoing since then, just fascination with how the human body works and what we can do to prevent disease. Because there's a lot of things I've done in my life differently, knowing what I know now.
Such as?
I wouldn't have eaten so many pies or Diet Coke. And I was subject to quite a lot of stress when I was working in London. Not sure what I could have done about that at the time, but I just didn't know anything about. I thought I ate healthily. Of course, you go to the doctors, they say to you, what's your diet like? And you say, fine, but nobody discusses what the fine is. And I was eating cereals, bread, pasta, ready meals, microwaved in their plastic, but because they were posh ready meals from Marks and Spencer's, I thought they were okay. Drinking gallons of Diet Coke because that was healthy, isn't it, right? All these things, looking back now, I think, oh no. And I drank Diet Coke through my pregnancy as well. And we've all had some genetic tests and things. And although, as you know, your genetics don't kind of determine completely your outcome, we have problems processing toxins. So I was toxic, dumped all my toxins into my poor unborn baby who had a genetic problem with processing them herself. And I think we're all doing that to a certain extent now. Each generation is getting more and more toxic.
How interesting. That's another topic for a discussion another time, but that's remarkable. So you think that there was a link between your diet when you were carrying Billy?
While I was carrying her, and prior to that as well, because my body was obviously quite toxic. And interesting, we worked with a nutritionist who specialised with children with cancer. And she said virtually every single child that she worked with had the same genetic defect. Really? It's the inability to produce glutathione, which is our master antioxidant. And my husband's got a lot of gut disease in his family. And we don't particularly have a massive amount of cancer in our family, but I think we'll start seeing more and more. So I'm quite aware now with our family and what we eat. I try and be as good as we can. It's not always easy though with kids.
Yes, yeah, and you've got your hands full at the moment, haven't you? You've got twins.
Yeah, 2-year-old twins, and Joe's now 9. Yeah, so yeah, I'm quite careful with them. I haven't had them vaccinated, which will probably horrify some people, but knowing what I know now, I'm a bit more careful.
Again, that's another story. Can you use thermal imaging on children?
You can, but because they're growing, there can be a lot of things that come up that are growth related rather than another problem. So what we say is for children under the age of 14 now, if their doctor refers with a specific problem, we will look at that specific thing. But just as a general body screening, it's not accurate enough to give a good reading. But if someone's got kind of a pain in their arm and doesn't want to go for an x-ray, we'll say, well, come along, we'll have a look and see if we can see anything.
Okay. Do you actually get many referrals from doctors? I'm quite surprised to hear you say that.
No, not that many. That's the referral from the doctor thing is kind of the protocol for children. You kind of have, if someone inquires about a child, you have to say, well, it's got to be for a specific reason. And this, I guess in America, doctors refer quite a lot.
Right.
But no, we have a few doctors that come for breast screening and send their wives for breast screening.
Oh, how interesting. So the tide is turning. I think it is generally, I know quite a few young doctors now who are learning about nutrition as part of their training, which would never have been done years ago, would it?
Yeah, I think that Raman Chatterjee, who's the doctor in the house on the BBC, I think he's doing an awful lot to make other doctors sit up and take note.
Yes,
but then I've spoken to some doctors myself, and even though they're personally interested in nutrition, they feel their hands are quite tied with what they can do in the NHS environment and with the sort of 5 to 7 minutes they get with a patient. It's very difficult for them.
It is, yeah. They do a wonderful job, but it's a great place if you're in a crisis, you've broken a leg or something like that, you need a diagnosis. But in terms of an overall well-being, it's not the place really, is it?
No.
As you rightly say, if people took more responsibility and control for their own health and well-being, we ourselves could help ease a lot of the pressure on the National Health Service instead of expecting everything to be done for us.
Definitely. I think we need different education in schools, I think, because right from when you're a child, you're told if you're poorly, the doctor will make you better. Yes. Whereas we shouldn't be saying that. If you're poorly, we should be doing X, Y, and Z ourselves.
Yes.
Not relying on doctors.
Yeah, indeed. So when you had, going back to your story again, you were 2 months into chemo and Billy got ill. So, and that must have been such a difficult time for you. You're going through your treatment, your daughter's poorly. So your husband...
It was horrendous. I cannot describe how awful it was. And people say, oh, how on earth did you manage? But when you haven't got a choice, you just do. And thankfully, we had Joe, our little boy, because I don't think we'd have got through it without him. You just have, when you've got another child to look after as well, you just force yourself to carry on. But yeah, losing a child is, as you know, is awful. Just the most horrendous experience anyone can go through.
So how was your own treatment affected by this? So how much chemo did you have? What was your treatment regime? I
had 6 rounds of chemo and then a few weeks of radiotherapy. Chemo didn't sit with me very well at all. I was so poorly. But I remember at the time, having just gone through chemo, my head was spinning and being sick, and then having to pile my daughter into a car and drive around hospitals from Bristol to Birmingham to London, trying to find somewhere that could treat her, because they were all saying, sorry, our radiotherapy machines are full. And she was basically dying before our eyes. And eventually we got accepted into a hospital in London, and they said she's an emergency, she's getting radiotherapy tomorrow. So that was a bit of a relief. So that eased things for a while, but yeah, it kind of made my cancer quite insignificant, to be quite honest. Everything just went on the back burner and I was focused on her.
Okay. Normally when people have cancer, one of the things I say to them is to minimize your stress, eliminate negativity around you, and take up a hobby or restart an old hobby or learn something new to take you outside of that cancer environment. But with your situation, it just simply wasn't possible. So
no, I basically, I was living on a children's cancer ward, which is quite sweet for all the little kids with cancer. Me there as well with a bald head.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So, okay, what's your next record?
It is the You and Me song by the Wannadies. Again, it's just another one that feels very summery. And I remember when I lived in London, we had an open top car for a while, and we used to turn the sound way up and dance around in the car to it.
Brilliant. Okay. Before we play that, Terri, how can people find you?
Our website is thermalogicahealthscreening.co.uk, or just Google thermal imaging health screening and we should pop up. And we've got a Facebook page as well.
Okay, so that's Thermalogica, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll put a link on my my pages as well. And
okay, great.
You're in the Perfect Health group with Elaine Godley on Facebook as well, so feel free to in there anytime, of course. And thank you for your contributions to the group when people do ask about thermal imaging. That's fantastic. So I'm going to love you and leave you now. Thank you very much for contributing to the show today, and we'll play out on your song by the Wannadies.
Okay.
Terri. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.